Welcome to Tech for Good with Bethnal Green Ventures. I'm Paul Miller, and I'm excited to be joined by Rob Hughes, co-founder and CEO of Tandem, startup rethinking early years education and technology for kids and families. We first got to know Tandem when they joined the BGV Tech for Good program last year. They're building something quite special, combining insights from their backgrounds in early childhood development with ethical technology design to help families spend better time together. So we thought it'd be great to bring Rob onto the show to hear more about what they're doing. So Rob, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Let's start with Tandem. What is Tandem and why does it matter?
Yeah, thanks. So Tandem is essentially a kind of never-ending library that encourages more and better interaction between parents and young children. We are combining kind of the science that we know about child development and why those early years are really just like foundations aren't just for buildings. They absolutely lay the foundations for our lives, what happens in the early years. And we basically think technology at the moment that exists for young kids and for families isn't good enough. And so we're trying to build what we think should exist and what we think can exist and can help to encourage and enable much stronger and better connection in those early years between parents and children or other adults or other people in those children's lives. And what Tandem really does is it allows parents or others to co-create with children a never-ending library of stories, fact books, play activities that are really tailored to that child, that adult, and that combination of the two with their interests, with things that they happen to be really excited about or places they're going on their holiday or interests that they happen to have at the moment, and lets them create illustrated picture books as a sort of catalyst for interaction.
Yeah, so for people who haven't given it a go, and they should give it a go, I'd argue. Talk us through how Tandem works for a typical family. How do you go about using it?
Yeah, so it's a mobile app at the moment, mobile and tablets and Kindle as well now. And it's, but we do have a sort of bigger vision for that. They could come on different services, but we're starting with mobile. And really what you do is you can download the app, you can find it on the App Store, Play Store and Kindle Store. And first what you do is you can tell us a little bit about yourself. You can tell what you want to tell us with privacy preserving. Most we ever ask for is the sort of first name actually for child. You can say your name and your relationship with the child. And then you can later tell us more about your interests or things that aren't, we're really we think books are brilliant. The whole sort of, the killer app for childhood is spending more time reading and playing with your kids. So we don't see this as a competitor to books, we see this as a real compliment. But there are things that books aren't that great at, which is they aren't always at the right level for a child. So what Tandem does is it lets you put in your child's age and their reading level, what they're interested in. And then it will use a combination of different generative AI tools to create them an illustrated picture book based on what prompts they've put in. So it could be an adventure story that's set on the moon featuring a wind turbine and a banana or a tractor or whatever happens to be around you. And then the real kind of core aim here is that can we take some of the friction out of a behavior that we know is really good and really good for you as a parent. Actually, it's really good for your mental well-being to spend good quality time interacting, but also really good for your child. And it's sort of make that easier, make it a little bit more fun, and maybe reach some people who maybe don't do that behavior a lot for whatever reason.
So just rewinding a little bit, tell us a bit about yourself. What were you doing before Tandem? And did you imagine yourself founding this kind of company?
Yeah, no. I mean, I've had a fairly, I think the generous term is a portfolio career. In that I originally trained in medicine. I worked as a doctor and worked in the NHS and in various things, general practice, a bit of A&E. And then I spent quite a while working as a civil servant, actually, as an international health advisor for the UK government in quite a mix of places from Yemen to Pakistan to Zambia to Whitehall. And really in that kind of, through that work where we were looking at really child malnutrition programs and child development programs more generally, I got kind of this really sort of deep obsession really with how can we kind of help more kids achieve their potential and more people achieve their potential. But the answer to getting more people to achieve their potential is actually in the early years. So we know that is a period when inequality is really kind of locked in. Not completely locked in, but it's much harder later for the education system to kind of level up if kids have had a really rough start in life. And that can be all sorts of reasons. But one of the biggest ones is a lack of kind of interaction and strong relationships and supportive, strong attachment to people around them. So I was working as a civil servant looking at these programs actually in places like Zambia, where we were trying to encourage more interaction in the early years and support families to have more services and more financial resources and things like that. and then moved into academia, a little bit of time in philanthropy, but then in academia as well, where I was really, my research has been looking at kind of how childhoods have been changing globally. So I did a lot of work around urbanization and particularly urban slums and what that looks like. And that's sort of where I first started getting really interested in technology, because one of the really interesting observations in some of our work, we found that in Nairobi slums, most kids had 0 books at home. The median was 0, so more than half had 0, and the others had maybe 1 or 2. But in almost all households, there was a mobile phone. And that's not the same extent, but that's echoed here in the UK. So in the UK, we have about 20% of kids don't own a book at home, which is quite wild for those of us who have kids with a room full of books. But there's a lot of kids who don't have that, but they all do have digital devices. And that sort of got that combined with some work with my co-founder, Al van Heerden, when we started to ask this question of really where is technology for children going, is sort of the origin of how we ended up with Tandem. Because we did a bit of what academics do, and we got people together and we got all these different voices, and we did some looking at the research, and we basically concluded that what was going to shape this was not academics. They were going to be kind of structurally behind. It was probably not even regulators, because they're also kind of lagging behind. It was industry. And so that's how we ended up initially doing some work with very big tech companies, and then eventually deciding there's actually a reason startups exist. It's because big tech companies don't always understand problems or spaces or opportunities like little people. And that led us to think, well, maybe there isn't anyone else doing this, and maybe no one else is better placed. So we decided to start up Tandem.
Was there a particular moment or example that sparked the particular idea of Tandem, where you thought this is the thing that we need to build?
Yeah, I think it was a series of moments, actually. And what was happening at so at this time we started thinking about technology, we were thinking about these sort of use cases of thinking about, could it work in childcare? Could it help us to help parents to understand what the kids are doing in childcare? And then we started to see the sort of very early emergence of some of these really highly capable AI models. And actually, it was kind of a mix. Like, I'm a very much a sort of tech optimist and like dystopian. I think if you're not seeing both sides, you're probably missing something. So I think we were sitting in this workshop in Newcastle, and we were saying, well, look, there's no stop button on this technology. Actually, there's some really exciting potential here. We had just been hearing from a health visitor who was talking about the challenges of supporting families to actually do what the sort of, we know from really good science is going to help their kids thrive, but the constraints they're facing. And we were, that's what got us into the space of saying, well, actually, can technology really unlock a lot here? And by building good tech for good, can we try and displace some of the really probably not helpful tech that lives in young kids' lives, like sort of never-ending streams of high-intensity content? Like, there is tech that's not good in young kids' lives. So can we displace that and bring something more? And that's where we sort of got onto this idea of Tandem. And, actually, to be honest, there was another moment, now I think about it, was very early mid-journey. And I was playing with my daughter, and I was just showing her this cool thing. And the way she immediately took it on she was creating combination animals, a polar bear and a dog and and then it got more weird, like a kind of cat and a butterfly or something. And it just showed me that there was some sort of magic in this, that if we could do, was enabling us to have a really fun conversation. And he thought, actually, maybe there's something around making this easy for people that we have tried to build in Tandem. And it's, again, that's what we try and keep with Tandem, is this sort of, I've done enough public health programming where you sort of do things for people, and it doesn't always work. It often doesn't work. It's same with like breastfeeding promotion. So it's quite refreshing to be doing something with people that's fun. And your hook is like, have fun, enjoy something. And by the way, this is probably going to help your kid do really well. So it's been a bit of an evolution, really, of how you think about the opportunity and the capabilities with tech as well.
Yeah. I mean, digging a bit deeper into that, in some ways, it's quite controversial to be working with AI and kids. How do you think about ethical design of what you're building, and how do you think about that, falling into the traps of some of the things that are obviously sort of potentially bad for kids when it comes to AI and tech?
Yeah, I mean, I think the super short answer is we think about it a lot. The more detailed answer is that actually there's several layers to it. One is that we think about there is no stop button. The tech is going to exist. It's worth just putting that to one side. The sort of press pause is unfortunately or not, I don't know. Anyway, it's not an option. So it's going to exist. So we're therefore trying to sort of lean in that sort of very overused phrase. But then alongside that, there's a whole set of things that we do that are around kind of trying to build ethically for young people. So we sort of have this sort of concentric layers of safety that we think about within the app. So we do quite a lot. We do think about this quite a lot at the sort of design, but also how we encourage users to use the app. I think the core thing is we try and like operate and adopt all of the good ethical principles that we bring from academia. Academia has lots of things that are frustrating and annoying and slow, but it has some really good things around kind of how it's learned to kind of make itself operate ethically. So before we set up a sort of formal board, we set up an ethics advisory board of people we've got a public health expert, we've got a pediatric safeguarding lead, we've got people who've been super senior in charity sector. And our basic principles, before we do anything that's different, we say to them, here's what we're doing, what could possibly go wrong, here's our mitigation if we missed anything. And so sort of little cycles of that as we innovate on new features. We also think quite hard about kind of guardrails within the app. So the models themselves have guardrails about what you can generate, but we've been very conscious around not putting open prompts. It's very deliberately discrete choices that constrains it a lot. You can't, have an image of a topless person in it. And we've got some funny stories about how we struggled initially. We tried to be thinking about gender diversity, and we had female firefighter as one of our characters. And actually we found some of the very early models were actually bringing out lots of sexualized images through that choice of that image. So we've sort of done a lot of testing and then built those guardrails. We also are very explicit with parents. The whole point of Tandem, the name's not a coincidence. The point is use it together. We talk to parents about how you actually feed the robot. So it's telling them it's made by a robot. We're telling them you're the first person to see it. We try and just think about all those things a bit upfront, so that it's the sort of thing I'd want to be using with my kids, and that's a reasonable sort of test. Mm-hmm. And then there's a whole other set of ethical issues around kind of the whole role of generative AI that, again, I would say we don't have answers on, but we're trying to work towards them. So we've just agreed our first collaboration with a real artist to actually build her style of images, build a style law that's trained on her images into the app so that we can have a share of royalty. So again, might not be the answer to how does AI affect the creative industries, but it might be something towards that. And then, there's a bunch of other ethics around AI that we could go into, but we could talk for all day.
And what sort of impact have you seen so far? Because you have users, you've got feedback coming in, and what's the feedback like from parents? And you're also working in partnership with some organizations as well.
Yeah, we've had some really good collaborations, and we've got really, I'd say we're early evidence still. I think I've forgotten my BGV impact scales, but we're at level 2, I think. I can't remember them. But no, we've got some really good, one of the first partnerships we had was with Nesta, who have this mission called Fairer Starts, where they're really aligned with what we're trying to do, which is around tackle the sort of root causes of inequality. And we partner with them to test our very earliest prototype of Tandem amongst sort of low-income families around London. And mostly qualitative findings, although we had some really nice diary studies that really just showed that what really success looks like is people going from never reading with their kids to reading with their kids, and people going from reading and playing with their kids to sometimes to doing it often. And we saw that across that cohort, there was a kind of shift where we saw several parents, and actually really interestingly, it skewed towards dads in that group, said that they were like, okay, they used to sometimes maybe read a bit with mum, but never with me. And then by putting Tandem on their phone, they said that it did two things. It got them connecting more with their kids, and it got them not doing other things that were the technoference thing with the kids. So we saw really nice signals with that. We've also got a partnership with Alderhay Children's Hospital, where we're looking at saying, well, can kids in hospital are disproportionately less well off. It's the kids who end up in A&E who are less likely to be reading. Also kids in things like respiratory clinics and places like that. And also just kids who are bored in hospital. So can we actually take Tandem and say, can it make hospital a little bit better? What we're also just building at the moment is a set of features. Again, coming back to this idea that books are brilliant, but books aren't always quite right for that moment. So we're building books that could help a kid prepare for getting an anesthetic or having an MRI scan. So you could sort of put yourself in that. And the aim with that is to say, well, can we take that experience and make it a bit less scary, help prepare it, maybe make it less likely you're going to need something like an anesthetic, and really have some quite near-term benefits for the health system, but also really just make it a bit less horrible for the kid. And then, just general users. The overall aim of this is just taking that friction out when you're sitting at and we're probably more at the we've got more and more metrics coming on stream now, but we've got much more sort of user testimonials of people saying, "Oh, this is amazing. We've been traveling." The sort of image of, "Oh, I'm going on the train, but my kid turned up with a big pile of books like this," or and actually it's not going to happen, but we can keep interacting, or the train's delayed. We find that, oh, you need to, let's do something that's not just switching on another episode of Peppa Pig or YouTube.
Yep. And what are you excited about next for Tandem?
So much. I mean, we're really excited. I mean, one of the big things that, it's the startup journey is really interesting because you go through these discrete periods of uncertainty that are variable. But I think we're in this really nice space where we've just closed our pre-seed round just before at the end of last year. Thank you, BGV. We've basically really just now planning to come out. We were sort of in semi-stealth mode in that we weren't doing any marketing at all. We had launched, but really hadn't marketed it. So we're learning about all these weird and wonderful world of social media marketing and how you actually build a community actually, and build a conversation with users and build numbers of users. So really excited about actually just getting Tandem out there into the wild much more. There's a bunch of iterations on the product side that we're quite excited about. We're looking at things like both upgrading to new image models, which have really, one of the fun but slightly scary things about Tandem has been, when we started on this, the finances of the financial model was entirely unviable because each story was taking us a week and costing us, people time, hundreds of pounds or thousands of pounds. To now we've got that really right down. And as the model costs are kind of coming down and the time of generations coming down and the quality's going up, the ability to generate a genuinely good book on the fly is now there. So we're kind of there on that as well. We've been playing a bit this week with things like video generation, although we're really mindful of not being a AI slop. It's much more of a sort of very subtle think about animations and engagement and getting just the right level of interest to keep a kid interested and keep it there. Yeah. Lots on the horizon.
Yeah, lots to come. And what are you enjoying most about running Tandem? And is there something that you enjoy less, or that's something that's still really hard?
I mean, you know this better than me, but there's there's upsides and downsides in every single job and every single kind of fully remote job. I think running a startup is slightly different. The things I like about it is I think to me, what we're doing feels very, very meaningful in that I think if we succeed in making a really big company and getting millions of kids reading, we'll feel super satisfied. The flexibility of a startup is nice. Having worked in a NHS, the British Civil Service, in academia, I quite enjoy the ability of being able to be like, let's do this, and then just doing it. And that's quite refreshing. Yeah. The downsides are everyone will probably tells you the same ones of, fundraising can be quite tiresome, although I think it does keep you honest. Actually, I quite like that. I think there's a lot of sort of bullshitting in lots of jobs and actually in VC as well. But I think to a certain degree, if you're gonna raise money, you have to keep, and if you're going to build a viable business, you have to actually be giving people value. And I like that. I like that discipline for us, that we actually, parents are going to download and pay. Or if we've just got our first library partnership where a library is going to they're going to have Tandem and they're going to have physical books and paper. We got print on demand, which I got prop. We're doing print on demand books, so you can take the digital to physical as well. You've got to actually give someone something of value, which keeps you.
And lastly, for anyone listening who's thinking of starting their own tech for good venture, what advice would you give?
I think it's a really good question. I think it's easy to say, oh yeah, do it. I think the answer is if you've got a problem or an opportunity that you can really imagine. It's a bit like people give that advice about doing a PhD, do the PhD on something you really think within a few years you're still going to be really excited about. I think it's similar actually for a startup. You've got to have a problem that you really genuinely care about. I find it bizarre when you hear stories of people often in the States, sort of surfing around problems for their startup. I can't get my head around that. To me, the core thing is fall in love with the problem and then I think that might mean you're in a better place to sort of succeed as a startup. And I think the second bit of advice I would have, and this is really where BGVs come in for us, is you need a network. And if you haven't got one, because you haven't spent your life in a sort of tech circles, then you need to find a way to build one, because there's probably 1,000 decisions you're making every couple of weeks. And if you can find people to sort of sense check those, then you'll probably make better ones. So I think, find a good problem and then, find a network if you haven't got one already.
Great. All right. Well, Rob, thank you so much for joining us on Tech for Good. It's been great to hear more about Tandem and what you're building. If you have suggestions for guests or topics we should be covering on Tech for Good, do get in touch. And if you're thinking of starting a Tech for Good venture and looking for investment, don't forget to check out bethnalgreenventures.com to see whether we might be able to help. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening and goodbye.
Bye.